A zoom lens that covers a wide range is really nice, but so often though with those type of lenses, there's disappointment because of a lack of good picture quality. So in this video, we're going to take a hard look at Tamron's 28 to 300 millimeter zoom lens and see how that does compared to its 50 to 300 millimeter lens.
And so is there even a need for a 50 to 300 anymore if we now have the 28 to 300? What compromises did Tamron make in making this 28 to 300?
So if this lens checks out with its nice wide angle and nice zoom and lighter weight, it really could be the perfect lens for traveling. You just need one lens, you don't need to carry any more. Here's a 50 millimeter view versus 28, and you can see how much more you get in the frame. If you're in a tight space like this is what you see at 50 versus 28. Now, first off, this comes at a little bit of a price. Take a look at the lines distorting near the top, and also you can see it gets a little dark in the corners.
Now, there are a few other E-mount super zoom lenses out there.
There is a 24 to 240 millimeter Sony lens, which is big and it's still expensive, even though it's very old and not up to today's standards of technology. Tamron has a 28 to 200 millimeter lens. This is the first version of that lens. Notice it's almost as big, but it is about a stop faster. So before we talk about the differences between these two lenses, let's see what they have in common. 67 millimeter filter threads, both weather sealed, both have built-in image stabilization. They don't come with a tripod collar. They are not compatible with Sony teleconverters. They use the VXD motor for autofocus. There's buttons on the lens. There's a big round programmable button. You've got a locking switch which prevents creep, and this is what creep looks like.
What a creep.
And both have USB-C ports on the lens itself which can be programmed. Now, some people may be worried about the aperture range of these lenses, that they're kind of slow, but I want to compare the two because there's more there than meets the eye. The 28 to 300 is at f4, but you can see only for 3 millimeters of wide angle at f4, and then it quickly goes to 4.5. For most of the aperture ranges, the 50 to 300 is a bit brighter, and I say a bit brighter because we're just talking about a third of a stop. Around the middle of the zoom range, both lenses are around f5 or f5.5. When you get to the telephoto end, the 50 to 300 is at f6.3, starting at about 181 millimeters. The 28 to 300 gets to its slowest aperture of 7.1 at about 170. But again, this is around a third of a stop difference, and that's not much. So unless you're really super critical about this, then you're really going to have to squint to see any kind of difference.
Is the aperture on both these lenses too slow to get that nice subject separation, that dreamy out of focus background everybody loves? Don't you need a fast prime lens to achieve that?
So I went around town with both lenses. Here's the 50 to 300 first to give you an idea of the type of background separation you can get. Now, naturally, you're not going to get a fully blown out background that you would with a much faster lens, but you can see here, due to the long zoom, it does give you a nice separation. The background is nice and out of focus, not too busy. And even at wide angle 50 millimeters with proper placement of your subject, the focus fall off is nice and pleasing. If you're getting something out of this video, please hit that like and subscribe button. It does help the channel. More lens and camera reviews coming up soon. Even at f7.1, look, the background is completely blown out on this 28 to 300. You can see you can even use these for portraits and get nice separation. The amount will depend on how far you are from your subject and what your zoom level is, but I found myself getting some nice background blur here. Forget the background, that's some pretty crazy hair, huh?
Having a bad hair day.
Tamron has really upped their game lately in optics and lens construction, and these two both have 9 aperture blades, and they use low dispersion lens elements, helping to control chromatic aberration. They have anti-reflection coatings to suppress ghosting and flare as well. The 50 to 300 is almost an inch longer, not extended, and holding them in your hands, they don't feel much different, even though the 50 is a bit heavier. But the 50 to 300 really is much bigger. Even the lens hoods are quite different. If you use the large lens hood of the 50-300, it's going to add quite a few inches to your lens. It may make it a little difficult to put in a bag. You could see with that lens hood on, it's between about 7.5 inches. The hood for the 28-300 is more petite to go along with the smaller profile of that lens. But both lens hoods are fully reversible for easy transport. The lens rings on both are well dampened, turn smoothly, and feel good in the hands. Now, both lenses can do macro, but at slightly different macro magnifications. But what's nice is that both lenses can give you macro at the wide end and also at the tele end, so you can increase your working distance. The 50-300 has slightly better macro numbers. Both lenses I found can get you in nice and tight, and since you're going to be using this on a Sony E-mount, like I have an A7R5 with a lot of pixels to crop in comparing the macro of both lenses at wide angle here's the 28-300, and you can see the field of view, and it is a little tighter with the 50-300 at its wide angle. And here at the tele end, here's the 28-300, you get in a little more with the 50-300. Both lenses have VC, which stands for vibration compensation or stabilization. In this test, I'm holding both lenses at full zoom, handheld, and the stabilization is about the same. Now, while the 50-300 looks a bit long on an APS-C body, you can still use it on an APS-C camera. The 28-300 here shown with the A6400 looks much more proportional than it did with the 50-300, and it's not too front heavy. And it also will stabilize a non-stabilized camera like the 6400. Here is the 300mm field of view on a full frame, and you get in 1.5 times tighter, effectively 450mm on an APS-C camera. And this footage is stabilized with the lens on an A6400, which has no in-body stabilization. In testing the continuous autofocus on both lenses, you can see here with the 50-300, it even recognizes the eye of the doll and puts a box around it and is very confident in going from the foreground to the background. I found very similar results with the 28-300. Tamron's lenses work very well with Sony autofocus. Now, as far as focus breathing is concerned, here is the 28-300 at wide angle, and here it is at telephoto. No real issues. 50-300 wide angle, and a telephoto coming up. I don't get too hung up about this, but I know some people get very concerned about it.
Now, if you ever shoot video and you zoom while shooting, this next little segment may be of interest to you because I found a little quirk with the 28-300.
Take a close look what happens when I zoom back out with the 28-300. For a little second there, near the end of the zoom range, it loses focus. I'm going to repeat the test, and right there, just for a split second, it loses focus. Some of you might want to zoom when you're shooting video, so you may want to be aware of this. It is repeatable, and it's just for a second, and it's only part of the zoom range. I suppose this has something to do with the lens is parfocal or not, meaning it can keep the focus throughout the zoom range. I noticed with the 50-300, it doesn't have that focus issue. It will stay in focus throughout the zoom range. So the 50-300 is more parfocal than the 28-300.
Now let's really dig into image quality and compare the sharpness between these two lenses.
So here's my standard balcony city skyline view, the 28-300 wide open at wide angle. This is cropping in to the center. Looks pretty good. Now we go to the corners where we do see a little bit of softening, but not bad overall at wide angle, wide open. Stopping down by one stop at f5.6. Let's crop in now and take a look, and it does look a bit sharper in the center, and now in the corner also a bit sharper. Now the 50-300mm can't do 28, so now we can compare them both at 50. So here is the 28-300 at 50mm at f5, widest aperture, cropped in here at f5 at the center, looks pretty good. The larger 50-300mm lens does look a little crisper here at 50mm wide open. Let's check out the corners here at 50mm. Here's the 28-300 wide open, and it actually looks a little better than the 50, which looks a little soft here in the corner. So let's stop down by one stop at 50 millimeters. Here's the 28-300 at f6.3 cropped in here at 50 millimeters. Comparing it to the 50, it's a lot closer. Maybe a very slight edge to the larger lens. In the corners, here's the 28-300 millimeters at 50 millimeters cropped in compared to the 50. Again, the larger lens may be a little softer in the corner. So at full tele on the 28-300, the fastest aperture is 7.1. This is cropped in. And here is the 50-300 millimeters at full tele wide open. Wow, it's pretty close. Now let's see the corner difference at full tele. Here's the 28-300 wide open, cropped in the corner. And wow, like neck and neck here. I could barely even tell the difference in the corner. So let's stop down to f8 on both lenses. Full tele, here's the 28-300 cropped in at full tele versus the 50-300 cropped in at full tele at f8. Surprisingly close, right? And here it is in the corner, the 28-300 full tele at f8 versus the 50-300 in the corner at full tele. But this is all nerdy pixel peeping. Let's say we stop with the pixel peeping. Can we see a difference without cropping? So this is with no cropping, and this is the 50-300 at full tele. This is what you can expect to get versus the 28-300 at f8, no cropping. And we'll look at them side by side. Do you know which one is which? Which one's on the left and which one's on the right? Any ideas? Anyone? Well, 28-300 is on the left. The 50-300 is on the right. I'd say they are pretty close if you don't pixel peep.
So I bought both these lenses out into the quote real world. I used either an A1 or an A7R5 for all the pictures, JPEGs, no processing, straight out of camera. Let's see how they do in real world shooting situations. First, let's start with the 50-300.
Zooming in on this guy working on his car showed me that he was actually smoking, and I just hope he's careful or else. Over this bridge, I wanted to wait until I got only one person right in the middle like this, and like this, right in the center of that bridge all alone. How about in 4K video? Here's the 50-300. Very nice color rendition. And this is hand holding at full zoom, so the stabilization is working very well, as is the autofocus. Beautiful bright red colors. Highlights staying controlled on her face. Lens is doing very well here, even though she almost tripped.
Keep her on a short leash. That was the plan.
Saw someone all the way in the distance, framed nicely by two trees. I give it a shot, and I think the 50-300 took a nice photo there. Here's a group of people or a family all wearing the same kind of sunglasses, so I thought this was a decent shot as well. Now check this out. I had to look twice here. This looked like a crocodile in the water. Crocodile or maybe an alligator?
See you later, alligator.
After a while, crocodile.
This may be the Broadway show The Lion King, but here we find Beauty and the Beast, captured by the Tamron 50-300.
But we've just spent 3 hours at the beauty parlor.
That's pickle.
Actually, we're in a little bit of a pickle too, because kind of going overtime here. I didn't realize how long this video was going to be. But if you're still here and you'd like to see some photos from the 28-300, here they come.
Just try not to scramble the letters on this sign.
She got you doing yoga shit.
Now there's a museum that may be worth checking out.
Who's gonna buy me a ticket?
I guess I look pretty professional with this lens in my camera because some nice guy came up to me and said, "How much for a headshot?" I said, "Don't you worry about it. I won't charge you. Let's just do it." He was a little stiff at first, so I told him to loosen up a little bit. We took a couple of shots and I touched up the photo a little bit in Luminar Neo, and this was the final result. Well, I guess you get what you pay for.
For free?
For free.
So, as I said in the beginning of the video, you guys might be making a decision about these two lenses, and so am I. What do you think here? I mean, I really like the smaller size and lighter weight of the 28-300. And while the 50-300 might be a tad better in sharpness and image quality, boy, it's not as much of a difference as the size and weight. And that extra wide angle is really helpful. So, what do you think? I am leaning towards the 28-300. Is that the right decision? I really value the opinions of my subscribers, and I want to thank you also. Recently hit the 10,000 subscriber mark. I really am very surprised and honored, and I want to thank every one of you for helping me get there. Yes, I'm actually talking to you. I want to thank you.
You talking to me?
Be sure to check out my other video comparing the 50-300 to Tamron's 50-400 millimeter lens.
So again, thanks so much for watching this video. Really let me know what you think, and see you in the next one.